There's something almost magical about the way an ancient scroll feels in your hands, delicate, brittle, like holding time itself. Every crack in the parchment, every faded stroke of ink carries echoes of voices long silenced, stories untold for centuries. These aren't just relics of the past, they're puzzles waiting to be solved, each one a tantalizing glimpse into worlds we've only begun to understand. Picture this, a scholar hunched over a fragment of text, squinting at symbols that haven't been read in thousands of years, chasing the ghost of a meaning just out of reach. That's the thrill of ancient scrolls. They refuse to give up their secrets easily. From the dusty libraries of Alexandria to the hidden caves of the Dead Sea, these scrolls have survived wars, fires, and the slow erosion of time, only to leave us with more questions than answers. Some contain prophecies so cryptic they could rewrite history. Others hint at lost civilizations, their languages still undeciphered, their wisdom locked away. Why do these texts remain such stubborn mysteries? Is it the ravages of time, the limits of our knowledge, or something more deliberate, a secret meant only for the worthy? The truth is, every scroll is a conversation across millennia, and we're only just learning how to listen. That's where this journey begins. Today, we're diving into 30 of the most baffling secrets hidden within these ancient scrolls, enigmas that have stumped historians, linguists, and archaeologists for generations. Some may hold clues to forgotten technologies, others to spiritual truths that could shake the foundations of what we know. But one thing's certain, each of these scrolls has a story to tell, and together we'll unravel them. So lean in close, because the past is whispering, and what it has to say might just change everything. Of all the Dead Sea Scrolls, none sparks the imagination quite like the Copper Scroll. Unlike the others, which contain sacred texts and ancient scriptures, this one reads like something straight out of an adventurer's wildest dreams, a detailed inventory of buried treasure. Etched onto thin sheets of copper, it lists 64 locations where vast quantities of gold, silver, and precious artifacts were supposedly hidden. But here's the catch: not a single one of these treasures has ever been found. The scroll's instructions are maddeningly vague, mentioning landmarks like the ruin in the valley or the cistern near the old road, phrases that could apply to countless spots across the arid landscapes of the Middle East. Some scholars believe the treasure was real, possibly loot from the Temple of Jerusalem, hidden away before the Roman conquest. Others argue it's purely symbolic, a metaphorical list meant for spiritual rather than material riches. What makes the Copper Scroll even more intriguing is its material. Why copper? Most scrolls were written on fragile parchment or papyrus, but this one was deliberately made to last. Was it meant to survive centuries, waiting for the right person to crack its code? Over the years, treasure hunters and archaeologists alike have tried and failed to follow its clues. Some expeditions even led to empty pits or dead ends, fueling theories that the treasure was either found long ago or never existed at all. Yet the mystery endures. Could modern technology, like ground-penetrating radar or advanced linguistics, finally unlock the Copper Scroll's secrets, or will its treasures remain forever just out of reach, a tantalizing whisper from the past? One thing's for sure, this isn't just a list of locations, it's a riddle wrapped in an enigma, daring us to keep searching. Imagine holding a book where every page taunts you with secrets just beyond your grasp. That's the Voinish Manuscript, a 400-year-old puzzle wrapped in vellum. Its pages crammed with illustrations that defy explanation. Strange plants with no known earthly counterparts, intricate astrological diagrams, and women submerged in emerald green baths, connected by twisting tubes that look like something from a medieval alchemist's dream. But the real mystery lies in the text itself, a flowing, elegant script that no one, not even the world's top codebreakers, has ever managed to decode. Theories about its origins are as wild as its illustrations. Some believe it's the work of a secretive medieval scholar, recording advanced botanical or astronomical knowledge in a cipher meant to evade the scrutiny of the Church. Others argue it's an elaborate Renaissance-era hoax, crafted to dupe a wealthy patron into paying for worthless wisdom. Then there are the more outlandish ideas that it's a message from extraterrestrials or a relic of a lost civilization speaking a language we've forgotten. What makes the Voinish Manuscript so maddening is how close we've come to cracking it, only to hit dead ends. During World War II, a team of Allied cryptographers fresh from breaking Nazi codes turned their skills to the manuscript and walked away baffled. Decades later, artificial intelligence was thrown at the problem, analyzing patterns in the text to determine if it was a real language or gibberish. The result, inconclusive. The script follows linguistic rules, suggesting it's not random, but its structure matches no known tongue. Could the key lie in the illustrations? Some researchers think the plants might hold clues, arguing they're stylized versions of real herbs used in forgotten medicinal practices. Others focus on the astrological charts, searching for hidden alignments that might reveal when or why the manuscript was created. But every path leads back to the same frustrating truth. The Voinish Manuscript refuses to surrender its secrets. Perhaps that's why it captivates us so deeply. In an age where we can decode genomes and predict the weather on Mars, this unassuming book remains a humbling reminder of how much we still don't know. Will future technology finally unravel its mysteries? Or is the real treasure not the solution but the endless chase, the thrill of grappling with a riddle that, after 6 centuries, still won't be solved? What if everything we thought we knew about history's most infamous betrayal was wrong? The Gospel of Judas, a fragile papyrus scroll discovered in a desert cave in Egypt during the 1970s, turns the traditional story of Judas Iscariot on its head. Unlike the New Testament accounts that paint Judas as a villain who betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, this ancient text presents him in a startling new light, not as a traitor, but as Jesus' closest confidant, the only disciple entrusted with a divine mission. Written in Coptic around the 4th century, the Gospel of Judas claims Judas acted under Jesus' own instructions, sacrificing his own reputation to fulfill a higher purpose. In one chilling passage, Jesus tells Judas, "You will exceed all of them, for you will sacrifice the man that clothes me." This suggests Judas' role was necessary, even heroic, a cosmic play where betrayal was the key to salvation. Imagine the weight of that revelation for scholars who spent lifetimes studying biblical texts. It's like finding a missing puzzle piece that reshapes the entire picture. But why was this gospel left out of the Bible? Early Christian leaders like Irenaeus of Lyons condemned it as heresy in the 2nd century, part of a fierce battle over which texts represented true Christianity. The Gnostics who wrote the Gospel of Judas believed secret knowledge, not just faith, led to enlightenment, a view that clashed with the emerging Orthodox Church. For centuries, the scroll was thought to be lost, surviving only in fragments quoted by its critics. That is, until a farmer stumbled upon it near El Minya, Egypt, hidden in a sealed jar. The discovery ignited a firestorm of debate. Some theologians argue the text reveals a suppressed strand of early Christian thought, one that saw Judas not as a betrayer but as a tragic figure playing his part in a divine plan. Others insist it's a later Gnostic invention, a symbolic story never meant to be taken literally. Carbon dating confirms the physical manuscript is ancient, but its ideas might be even older, passed down orally before being written. What's undeniable is how the Gospel of Judas forces us to confront the messy, human side of history, how stories get written, rewritten, and sometimes erased altogether. Was Judas truly misunderstood, or did later believers reshape his story to fit their own narrative? The scroll offers no easy answers, only whispers from a time when Christianity was still figuring itself out, a reminder that history is rarely as simple as it seems. The Sibylline books weren't just ancient scrolls, they were Rome's emergency hotline to the divine. Imagine the scene, the Republic teetering on the brink of disaster, plague ravaging the streets, or enemy armies massing at the gates. In those desperate moments, Rome's leaders would turn to these mysterious texts, said to contain the prophecies of the Sibyl, a prophetess who channeled the wisdom of Apollo himself. But here's what's haunting. Of the original 9 books, only fragments survived. The rest burned in a fire that may have erased prophecies shaping the fate of empires. What made these books so powerful wasn't just their content, but who controlled them. A secretive priesthood guarded the scrolls, interpreting their riddles for senators and emperors. The prophecies were never straightforward. They spoke in metaphors, warning of a wolf among the sheep or a crown of flames. Some scholars believe these vague phrases were deliberately opaque, allowing the elite to bend their meanings to political needs. When Rome faced invasion, the books might advise a sacrifice of the highest, a conveniently flexible directive that could mean anything from burning precious goods to appointing a dictator. The fragments we have are tantalizing. One mentions a 7th king who would bring Rome to its zenith, a possible reference to Augustus, the first emperor. Another warns of a city drowned in gold, a prophecy some link to Nero's extravagance before Rome's civil war. But what's lost is even more intriguing. Ancient historians like Livy hint that the original books predicted events far beyond Rome's borders, possibly even the rise of Christianity or the fall of Constantinople over 1,000 years later. Why were they destroyed? The official story blames a careless fire, but conspiracy theories abound. Some suggest early Christians purged them to erase pagan influence. Others argued jealous emperors burned prophecies that threatened their rule. Whatever the truth, their absence leaves us wondering, did the Sibyl foresee the fall of Rome itself? And if so, did someone deliberately silence that warning? The few surviving lines tease us with glimpses of a grander narrative, one where fate wasn't just predicted, but perhaps even manipulated by those who held the scrolls. Today, historians piece together clues from second-hand accounts, trying to reconstruct what the lost books might have said. But like trying to reassemble a shattered mosaic, the full picture eludes us. Maybe that's for the best. Some prophecies, after all, are meant to stay mysterious whispers from the gods, meant only for those desperate enough to listen. Buried in the rugged cliffs near Nag Hammadi, Egypt, a chance discovery by a farmer in 1945 unearthed one of the most controversial collections of ancient texts ever found: 13 leather-bound codices containing over 50 religious works, many of them unseen for nearly 2,000 years. These weren't just dusty scrolls, they were a theological time bomb, preserving Gnostic teachings that early Christian authorities had tried desperately to erase. Among them, the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Philip presented a radical vision of spirituality, one where enlightenment came not through blind faith, but through secret knowledge, and where the divine wasn't just a distant father figure, but a radiant mother too. The most startling revelation: the Gnostic texts describe a divine feminine presence called Sophia, a celestial being embodying wisdom who played a central role in creation. In one passage, she's called the first thought of God, a concept that would have been heresy to the early church fathers. This wasn't just a minor theological tweak, it was a full-throated challenge to the male-dominated orthodoxy taking shape in the 4th century. Little wonder, then, that these texts were buried in a sealed jar, hidden like contraband. Whoever stashed them away likely knew they were safeguarding ideas powerful enough to get someone killed. What makes the Nag Hammadi Library so explosive isn't just its content, but its timing. These texts date to the same era when the Christian Church was solidifying its canon, burning rival texts and branding Gnostics as heretics. The Gospel of Philip, for example, hints at rituals involving sacred marriages and mystical unions, practices that would have scandalized the bishops at the Council of Nicaea. Even more provocative are its references to Mary Magdalene, not as a repentant sinner, but as Jesus' closest disciple, the one who knew the all. Imagine how that might have altered 2 millennia of religious history if it hadn't been suppressed. Yet for all their revolutionary ideas, the Nag Hammadi texts remain shrouded in ambiguity. Their language is cryptic, layered with symbolism that even modern scholars struggle to unpack. Take the infamous bridal chamber metaphor. Was it a literal sacrament, a spiritual allegory, or something else entirely? The Gnostics loved their riddles, and decoding them feels like trying to grasp smoke. Some passages read like philosophical treatises, others resemble dreamlike poetry, speaking of luminous realms and cosmic battles between light and darkness. The mystery deepens when we ask why these texts survived at all. Was it sheer luck that a farmer's shovel struck that clay jar, or did someone, a dissident monk, a fleeing mystic, bury them deliberately, hoping future generations would rediscover their truths? Today, as scholars painstakingly translate every faded line, one thing becomes clear. The Nag Hammadi Library isn't just a collection of ancient books. It's a defiant whisper from the losers of history, a reminder that the past is never as monolithic as it seems. And perhaps that's the real forbidden knowledge here, the unsettling idea that our understanding of faith, power, and even reality itself might rest on foundations far more fragile than we'd like to admit. The Dresden Codex isn't just a relic, it's a masterpiece of cosmic precision. Tucked away in the vaults of a German library for centuries, this bark paper manuscript, painted in vivid blues and reds, is the most sophisticated surviving text from the ancient Maya. While pop culture reduced its contents to a sensationalized doomsday prophecy for 2012, the truth hidden in its 78 pages is far more astonishing. This isn't superstition, it's advanced astronomy encoded in intricate glyphs, proof that the Maya mapped the heavens with a precision that rivals modern science. Take their Venus tables, for example. The Codex tracks the planet's movements with an error margin of just 1 day over 500 years. To achieve that without telescopes or calculators, Mayan astronomers must have spent generations observing the sky, passing down meticulous records. Their calculations weren't just for show, they dictated everything from agricultural cycles to the timing of sacred rituals. A single misstep could mean failed harvests or broken alliances. But how did they do it? Some scholars point to their unique Vigesimal numbering system, based on 20s instead of 10s, which may have simplified complex math. Others believe they used shadow-casting devices or aligned temples as celestial markers, turning architecture into a giant astronomical tool. Then there's the infamous doomsday myth. The Codex does reference the end of a 13-Bacton cycle in 2012, but there's no apocalyptic warning, just a ceremonial reset like flipping an odometer. The misinterpretation says more about modern anxieties than ancient beliefs. What's truly chilling, though, are the Codex's eclipse predictions. By cross-referging lunar cycles, the Maya could forecast eclipses decades in advance, a feat European astronomers wouldn't match until the Renaissance. One page even depicts a serpent devouring the sun, a vivid metaphor for an eclipse that scholars later matched to a real event in 891 CE. Yet for all we've decoded, the Dresden Codex still guards mysteries. Certain glyphs resist translation, possibly representing lost mathematical concepts or even astronomical phenomena we've yet to identify. And then there's the puzzle of its survival. Most Mayan books were burned by Spanish missionaries who saw them as devilish. How did this one slip through? Some say it was smuggled to Europe as a curiosity, its true value overlooked. Now, as researchers use multispectral imaging to reveal faded passages, we might be on the verge of new breakthroughs. The real lesson of the Dresden Codex isn't about doomsdays, it's about resilience. In these fragile pages, a civilization speaks across centuries, reminding us that genius isn't bound by technology. The Maya looked up, saw order in the chaos, and left us a map to the stars. The question is, what else might we learn if we keep listening? Hidden among the shelves of England's great libraries, the Book of Soyga crackles with an energy that defies its age. This 16th century manuscript isn't just another dusty tome, it's a labyrinth of arcane symbols, celestial diagrams, and incantations so potent they reportedly captivated John Dee, Queen Elizabeth I's personal astrologer. Dee, a man who spoke to angels and mapped the boundaries of the unseen world, spent years obsessing over Soyga's secrets, desperate to crack its code. Yet even he, with his legendary intellect, could only scratch the surface before his death, leaving behind notes filled with frustrated questions. What makes Soyga so tantalizing is its structure. The bulk of the text reads like a sorcerer's handbook, detailing rituals to summon spirits and command the elements, but flip to the final 36 pages, and the writing flips too literally. These passages are inscribed backward, a mirror script that suggests either desperate secrecy or perhaps a language meant to be spoken aloud in reverse. Some scholars believe these inverted pages contain the book's most powerful spells, words so dangerous they had to be concealed from casual readers. Others argue it's an elaborate cipher, hiding political secrets or heretical ideas beneath layers of misdirection. Theories about Soyga's origins are as wild as its contents. One persistent legend claims it was dictated by the archangel Uriel to Adam in Eden, passed down through generations of mystics. More grounded researchers point to similarities with medieval grimoires like the Key of Solomon, suggesting it was compiled by an unknown occultist trading secrets in the shadows of Renaissance Europe. But here's what chills the spine. Modern carbon dating confirms the vellum is genuinely from the 1500s, yet some of its astrological tables reference celestial alignments that wouldn't be calculated accurately for another 3 centuries. How, in 2006, 2 historians made a breakthrough. Using Renaissance-era cipher techniques, they partially decoded Soyga's tables, revealing what might be names of angels or elemental forces. But the backward pages, those remain stubbornly opaque. Some speculate they require a key, lost to time, perhaps a rotating cipher disk or a keyword whispered only to initiates. Even artificial intelligence has been enlisted, analyzing letter patterns for hidden meanings, but the book resists like a living thing guarding its soul. Perhaps that's the point. Magic, after all, was never meant to be easy. In an age where we're used to instant answers, Soyga stands as a monument to mystery, reminding us that some doors won't open just because we knock. Whether it's a sorcerer's legacy, a genius-coded rebellion, or something far stranger, one thing's clear: this book wasn't written to be understood. It was written to be sought, and 6 centuries later, the hunt continues. Gold isn't the only thing that glitters in the cryptic world of the Ripley Scrolls. These sprawling, vividly illustrated manuscripts named after the enigmatic 15th century alchemist George Ripley aren't just instructions for turning lead into precious metal. They're a visual labyrinth, a riot of dragons, kings, and celestial orbs woven together with verses so poetic they border on riddles. To the untrained eye, they look like a medieval comic book gone wild. But to those who have spent decades deciphering them, they might just hold the ultimate alchemical secret, not just how to transform matter, but how to transform the self. Take the central motif, the Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail. At first glance, it's a classic alchemical symbol for cycles of destruction and renewal. But in Ripley's hands, it becomes something more. The scrolls show the serpent coiled around a glowing sphere, its body dissolving into a river of liquid gold. Some scholars argue this isn't just metaphor. It's a coded recipe, a chemical process involving mercury and antimony, substances alchemists believed could purify metals, and by extension, the human soul. Others insist the gold isn't literal at all, but a stand-in for spiritual illumination, the philosopher's stone representing inner wisdom rather than physical treasure. Then there are the baffling diagrams. One section depicts a king and queen submerged in a flask, their bodies dissolving into a crimson liquid, a possible allusion to the chemical wedding, where opposing elements unite to create perfection. Another shows a phoenix rising from ashes beside a tower struck by lightning, imagery that echoes ancient texts on distillation and sublimation. Were these step-by-step lab instructions or allegories for personal transformation? The scrolls refuse to say outright, leaving us to wrestle with their dual meanings. What makes Ripley's work so enduring is its ambiguity. Even in his own time, he was a paradox, a defrocked monk turned court alchemist, whose writings were banned by the church yet coveted by kings. His scrolls borrow from older traditions, blending Egyptian, Arabic, and Christian mysticism into something entirely new. Some passages read like straightforward lab notes, mentioning furnaces and alembics. Others drift into pure poetry. Make of the man and woman a circle, one line instructs, then a square, then a triangle, and finally, a circle again. Is this geometry or theology? Modern scientists have tried to test Ripley's claims. In 2014, a team used particle physics to analyze traces of gold in a replica of his apparatus and found microscopic traces of transmutation. The results were inconclusive but tantalizing. Could Ripley have stumbled onto nuclear reactions centuries before they were understood? Or was his gold always meant to be something richer, a metaphor for the alchemist's own journey from ignorance to enlightenment? The Ripley Scrolls resist easy answers, and maybe that's their power. They invite us to live in the question, to embrace the mystery. After all, the search for the Philosopher's Stone was never just about wealth. It was about the pursuit itself, the unshakable belief that hidden knowledge could unlock the universe. And in that sense, perhaps Ripley's real secret isn't in the scrolls at all, but in the act of seeking, the alchemy of curiosity that turns leaden doubt into golden understanding. Tucked away in the Mogao caves along the Silk Road, the Dunhuang star atlas lay hidden for over 1,000 years until a curious monk broke the seal in 1907. What he uncovered wasn't just a relic but a revelation, a hand-painted scroll stretching nearly 13 feet long, dotted with more than 1,300 stars arranged with startling precision. Dated to the Tang dynasty around the year 650, this isn't merely an ancient curiosity, it's the world's oldest complete star map, a celestial snapshot frozen in time. And here's what stuns astronomers. Its charts are so accurate, they could still guide a navigator today. But the real mystery lies in the details. Among the familiar constellations like Orion and the Big Dipper, the atlas depicts strange formations modern skywatchers wouldn't recognize, phantom star patterns with names like the Celestial Jail and the Judge's Seat. Were these purely mythological, or could they represent real astronomical phenomena lost to history? Some researchers suggest they might track long-faded supernova or comets, events ancient scholars meticulously recorded but later civilizations forgot. Others point to the atlas's division of the sky into 12 sections, mirroring the Chinese zodiac but with subtle deviations that hint at influences from Persian or even Greek astronomy. This wasn't just a local sky guide, it was a cosmopolitan fusion of celestial knowledge, proof that the Silk Road traded ideas as eagerly as spices and silk. What's most striking is how the Dunhuang astronomers achieved such accuracy without telescopes. The scroll stars are positioned using a grid system, their brightness graded by size, a technique so advanced it wouldn't be matched in Europe until the Renaissance. Even more impressive, the atlas accounts for atmospheric refraction, the bending of starlight near the horizon, a phenomenon Western science wouldn't formalize for another millennium. How did they know? Some credit meticulous observation, others suspect they inherited data from even older sources now lost. Yet for all its brilliance, the atlas raises more questions than it answers. Why were certain stars highlighted in vermilion red while others faded into the background? Could these markings signify variable stars, celestial bodies that dim and brighten over time? Or were they ritual symbols, mapping the heavens as much for divination as navigation? And why was the scroll sealed in a cave, hidden away like a forbidden text? Perhaps the answer lies in its final section, a series of ominous prophecies linking celestial events to earthly disasters, a reminder that in ancient China, astronomy wasn't just science, it was survival. Today, as satellites and space telescopes push the boundaries of cosmic exploration, the Dunhuang Star Atlas humbles us. It's not just a map of the past, but a mirror reflecting how much we've yet to discover. Those unknown constellations, they might still be up there, waiting for us to look up and remember. After all, the night sky hasn't changed, only our eyes. The Popol Vuh isn't just a creation story, it's a defiant whisper from a civilization that refused to be silenced. While Spanish conquistadors burned countless Mayan texts as works of the devil, this sacred manuscript survived, hidden in plain sight. Written in the 1600s by members of the Kayich Maya nobility, it preserves a cosmology so vivid, so alive, that reading it feels like stepping into a world where gods walk among mortals, where the sky is a living being, and where humanity's origins are as messy and experimental as a potter's workshop. What sets the Popol Vuh apart from other creation myths is its refreshing honesty. The gods don't get it right the first time. Their initial attempts at making humans are almost comically flawed, first crafting beings from mud who crumble apart because they're too weak. Next, they try wood, but these creations are soulless, mindless, and ultimately rebel against their makers. It's only on the third try, using sacred corn, that they succeed. This isn't just a story, it's a profound meditation on failure, iteration, and what it truly means to be human. Corn wasn't just a crop to the Maya, it was the literal flesh of their people, a bond between earth and spirit that sustained them in life and in myth. How did this text escape destruction? The answer lies in its dual existence. While the original hieroglyphic version was likely lost to flames, a group of Kayich scholars secretly transcribed it into Latin script, disguising it as a Christian document. They even gave it a Spanish title, Popol Vuh, meaning council book, a bland name that masked its explosive contents, For centuries, it circulated quietly among indigenous communities, a coded resistance preserving their identity under colonial rule. Then, in the 1800s, a priest stumbled upon it in a Guatemalan church library, recognizing its value just in time to save it from decay. The Popol Vuh's survival is a miracle, but its message is even more extraordinary. Unlike the tidy, top-down creation of Genesis, this is a story of collaboration, gods debating, arguing, even failing before finding the right path. The hero twins, Xbalanque and Hunahpu, aren't passive figures. They descend into the underworld, outwit death gods, and reshape reality through cleverness and courage. It's a narrative that celebrates resilience, a quality the Maya themselves would need in the dark centuries to come. Today, scholars pore over every word, decoding layers of meaning. The corn motif, for instance, isn't just symbolic. Recent archaeology confirms maize was genetically engineered by the Maya over thousands of years, a real-life parallel to their mythic tinkering. And those failed creations, some researchers see them as allegories for earlier hominids or even other civilizations, proof that the Maya viewed creation as an ongoing, imperfect process. The Popol Vuh endures because it's more than a relic. It's a challenge to see divinity not as distant perfection, but as something striving, learning, and growing alongside humanity. And perhaps that's why it had to survive, to remind us that even gods get second chances. The Book of the Dead wasn't just a funeral accessory. It was an ancient Egyptian passport to eternity, filled with spells so potent they could bend the afterlife itself. Imagine being buried with a scroll that held the power to silence demons, outwit gods, and even persuade the scales of judgment to tip in your favor. These weren't mere prayers, they were survival tools, meticulously crafted to guide the soul through a perilous underworld where one wrong turn meant oblivion. But here's what sends chills down scholars' spines. Even after centuries of study, chunks of this sacred text remain untranslatable, their meanings locked behind archaic symbols that might name deities we've never heard of, or worse, rituals too dangerous to speak aloud. Take spell 17, for instance. On the surface, it's a poetic ode to the sun god Ra, describing his nightly journey through the darkness. But certain passages, written in a cryptic dialect, seem to shift meaning depending on how they're recited. Some Egyptologists believe these lines contain hidden instructions for navigating Juwat, the Egyptian underworld, describing gates guarded by fire-breathing serpents or lakes of flame that only the right words could extinguish. Others argue the spell's true power lies in its silences gaps where the scribe left blanks, as if the most potent magic couldn't even be written down. Then there's the mystery of the lost names. Throughout the Book of the Dead, deities are invoked by titles like He Who Holds Back Chaos or the Lioness Who Devours Shadows. But in fragments discovered near Luxor in 2019, researchers found spells referencing a god simply called the Drowned One, a figure absent from any known pantheon. Was this a forgotten deity, a regional spirit, or something darker? The surrounding text warns that speaking this name carelessly could unseal the abyss, a phrase that sparked endless debate. What's startling is how personalized these scrolls were. No two copies are identical. Each was tailored to the deceased, with spells added or omitted based on their wealth, status, or secret fears. A vizier might have spells to charm Osiris, while a farmer's scroll focused on appeasing hunger in the afterlife. Some even included cheat sheets, tiny illustrations showing the soul how to dodge underworld traps, like a cosmic board game where the stakes were eternal. Modern technology is peeling back layers we never thought possible. Multispectral imaging has revealed erased passages in some scrolls where names were scrubbed out, perhaps after a fall from grace or to deny someone's afterlife entirely. Meanwhile, linguists using AI pattern recognition have spotted repeating glyph clusters that might be a lost magical grammar, a syntax for bending divine laws. But the real question lingers: did these spells work? To the Egyptians, words were living things, their very sounds shaping reality. A properly uttered spell could morph the soul into a heron, a gust of wind, or even a star. Skeptics call it superstition, yet there's power in belief so absolute it spanned millennia. Maybe the magic wasn't in the ink or papyrus, but in the certainty that death wasn't an end, just a door, and the right words were the key. The Oude Linde book doesn't just challenge history, it explodes it. Discovered in the Netherlands in 1867, this hefty manuscript, written on weathered parchment, claims to be the chronicle of an advanced Frisian civilization dating back over 4,000 years. Its pages describe matriarchal societies with democratic councils, sophisticated navigation techniques, and catastrophic floods that reshaped Europe, all centuries before the rise of ancient Greece or Egypt. But here's where things get messy. The moment it surfaced, scholars split into warring camps. Was this a genuine preservation of prehistoric oral traditions, or an elaborate 19th century forgery designed to stir nationalist pride? The controversy hinges on the book's uncanny details. It mentions cities like Atland, a possible analogue to Atlantis, swallowed by the sea around 2193 B. CE, a date suspiciously close to geological evidence of major North Sea flooding. It describes celestial navigation using star stones, crystals that could polarize sunlight, a concept eerily reminiscent of Viking sunstones, later confirmed by archaeologists. Even more striking are its cultural assertions, a society where women held spiritual and political power as priestesses, a radical idea for a text found in an era when women's rights were fiercely debated. Coincidence? Skeptics say yes, pointing to linguistic quirks that suggest modern Dutch influences. Believers counter that oral traditions can evolve linguistically while preserving core truths. Then there's the flood narrative. The Oude Linde describes a world drowned by the wrath of the goddess Freya, a cataclysm so precise it aligns with known meltwater pulses from the last ice age. Mainstream archaeology confirms that Doggerland, a vast landmass connecting Britain to Europe, did vanish beneath rising seas around 6,000 years ago. Could the book be echoing ancestral memories of this trauma? Modern genetic studies add fuel to the fire. Frisian DNA shows unusual continuity, suggesting their ancestors might have indeed weathered ancient disasters. But the hoax theory has its own compelling evidence. The manuscript's first known owner, Cornelis over de Linden, had ties to nationalist groups eager to prove Frisia's historical supremacy. Carbon dating confirms the parchment is medieval, not ancient, though some argue it could be a copy of a much older text. The clincher for critics: passages that suspiciously mirror 19th century political ideals like democracy and gender equality projected onto the past. Yet the debate won't die. In 2017, linguists identified potential Proto-Germanic roots in the text, older than expected for a forgery. Meanwhile, geologists note that its flood accounts match sediment layers in the North Sea. The truth might lie somewhere in between, not a wholesale fake, nor an unaltered relic, but a patchwork of genuine folklore, half-remembered history, and deliberate embellishment. What makes the Oude Linde book so magnetic isn't just its content, but what it represents: the human ache to reclaim lost origins. Whether it's a fraud, a time capsule, or something in between, it forces us to confront how easily history can be rewritten, and how desperately we long to find ourselves in the fragments of the past. The Rohenk Codex doesn't just defy translation, it mocks it. Discovered in a Hungarian nobleman's library in the 1800s, this 200-page enigma is written in an alphabet unlike anything else on Earth. Its 448 symbols swirl across the pages in tight, rhythmic patterns, interspersed with bizarre illustrations, crucified figures with sunburst halos, warriors battling mythical beasts, even what appears to be a detailed map of the cosmos. For over a century, linguists, cryptographers, and conspiracy theorists have wrestled with its secrets, and yet the Codex guards its meaning like a sphinx. Is it a lost gospel, a medieval epic, or, as some suspect, an elaborate hoax designed to baffle the cleverest minds of the 19th century? What makes the Rohenk Codex so maddening is how it plays with expectations. At first glance, the script resembles runes or early Hungarian syllabaries, but closer inspection reveals eerie inconsistencies. Some symbols repeat with mathematical precision, suggesting a language with strict grammatical rules. Others appear randomly, as if the writer was inventing on the fly. Then there are the illustrations, alternately pious and chaotic, blending Christian iconography with scenes that look ripped from pagan folklore. One particularly unsettling image shows a robed figure holding a severed head, surrounded by symbols that might be numbers or perhaps a recipe. Theories about its origins range from plausible to fantastical. Hungarian scholars once claimed it was a record of ancient Magyar tribes, written in a Proto-Hungarian script. Others argue it's a Dacian relic, a language so obscure it left barely a trace in history. More audacious suggestions tie it to the Knights Templar, or even a secret sect of alchemists encoding forbidden knowledge, but the most persistent and provocative theory is that it's a forgery. In the 1800s, Europe was obsessed with discovering ancient texts, and a skilled fraudster could have crafted the Codex to cash in on the craze. Carbon dating complicates this idea. The vellum dates to the 15 or 1600s, centuries older than its discovery. Attempts to crack the code have bordered on obsession. In the 1970s, a researcher claimed it was written in a cipher based on Old Church Slavonic, but his translation was riddled with gaps. Decades later, a team using statistical analysis concluded the symbols matched no known language structure, yet the illustrations seemed to tell a coherent, if cryptic, story. One breakthrough came in 2018, when a linguist noticed recurring clusters near depictions of war, hinting that certain symbols might represent battle cries or weapons. But without a Rosetta Stone to provide a key, every theory remains speculative. Perhaps the most haunting question isn't what the Rohenk Codex says, but why it was made. If it's genuine, why would someone pour such effort into a text no contemporary could read? If it's fake, why include hundreds of pages of consistent, painstakingly crafted gibberish? The answer might lie in the illustration's strangest detail, margins filled with tiny, grinning faces, as if the scribe knew we'd still be staring at their work centuries later, utterly bewildered. Some secrets aren't meant to be solved, they're meant to endure. Buried in the rugged mountains of Iranian Kurdistan, the Avraman Parchments seem ordinary at first glance, dry legal contracts from the 1st century BCE, recording the sale of vineyards and olive groves in crisp Greek script, but lean in closer, and the margins tell a different story. Faded annotations snake around the edges of the text, cryptic symbols and abbreviated phrases that don't match the formulaic language of ancient property deals. Some look like personal memos, others like coded references to parties never named in the main text. One particularly puzzling note beside a land transfer reads simply, "Under the eye of the bull." Was this a religious invocation, a secret signature, or a veiled threat? Legal scholars initially dismissed these marks as scribbles until they noticed patterns. Certain symbols recur near transactions involving the same families, suggesting hidden alliances or disputes simmering beneath the surface. Even stranger, some contracts bear tiny, almost invisible dots arranged in geometric patterns like a primitive barcode. Infrared imaging revealed these weren't random ink blots but deliberate marks, possibly a tamper-proof system to prevent forgery. Or were they something more? One theory points to the Mithraic Mysteries, a clandestine Roman cult that worshipped the bull-slaying god Mithras. Their initiates used coded symbols to identify each other, and the Avraman region was a known hotspot for their rituals. Could these parchments double as membership records for a shadowy brotherhood? Then there's the mystery of the missing clauses. Compared to standard Greek contracts of the era, the Avraman documents omit key details: no penalties for default, no witness lists, no descriptions of boundary markers. At first, historians assumed this was local legal shorthand, but when researchers compared them to near-identical parchments found in Afghanistan, they spotted eerie similarities in what was left unsaid. Both sets avoid mentioning kings or officials, unusual for an era when rulers typically meddled in major land deals. Was this a deliberate act of resistance, a way to keep transactions off the imperial radar? Or proof of a parallel legal system operating in the shadows? The parchment's survival alone is a minor miracle. Hidden in a cave for 2 millennia, they avoided the fate of so many ancient texts burned, recycled, or lost to time. Even the ink defies expectation. Analysis shows it contains trace amounts of a rare copper compound, giving it an unnatural bluish tint. This wasn't standard scribe's ink but a bespoke blend, possibly meant to resist fading or denote special status. Who went to such lengths, and why? Modern technology is peeling back layers of this enigma. Multispectral imaging has uncovered palimpsest's ghostly traces of older texts scraped away to make room for the contracts. Some show fragments of what might be financial ledgers or poetry, repurposed parchment hinting at a bureaucracy stretched thin, but the ultimate secret may lie in the parchment itself. DNA testing of the animal hides revealed they came from a specific breed of goat native to the Avraman highlands, a detail that could trace these documents to a single workshop, or even a single scribe with something to hide. Perhaps the truth is simpler yet more profound. In an age of empires and upheaval, these contracts weren't just about land, they were about identity. The Greek script, the local symbols, the silent omissions, all speak to a world where law wasn't just written by the powerful, but quietly rewritten by those navigating its edges. Every stroke, every hidden mark is a whisper from people determined to be remembered on their own terms, and 2,000 years later, we're just beginning to hear them. The Liberlintius shouldn't exist, at least not where we found it, wrapped around the body of an Egyptian mummy in a Zagreb museum. This fragile linen scroll is the only known book written entirely in Etruscan, a language so obscure even the Romans forgot how to read it. Think about the irony: a sacred text from ancient Italy, torn into strips and used as burial cloth for someone thousands of miles away. It's like finding the Dead Sea Scrolls stitched into a medieval coat. But the real shock isn't just its bizarre journey, it's what the text actually says. Dating back to the 3rd century B.C.E., the Liberlintius isn't a funerary text or a spellbook, as you'd expect from its mummy-bound fate. Instead, it's a meticulous liturgical calendar, detailing rituals for gods whose names we can barely pronounce. Each column of faded ink marks sacred days, offerings of wine and grain, and invocations to deities like Uni, their version of Juno, and Tinia, their Zeus. These weren't casual notes, they were instructions for priests, a sacred script for keeping the cosmos in balance. So why end up as mummy wrappings? One theory suggests it was loot from Roman conquests, shipped to Egypt as exotic scrap paper. Another posits an Etruscan expat community in Alexandria clinging to fragments of home. Deciphering it has been a nightmare. Etruscan isn't just dead, it's isolated, unrelated to Latin or Greek. We've pieced together fragments from bilingual inscriptions and Roman cribs, but the Liberlintius remains stubbornly opaque. Some words pop up repeatedly, like zeri, possibly meaning month, or thuffle, which might signify offering. But entire passages are linguistic black holes. Take this eerie line, Azera esecutren terza, best guess, the gods received the sacrifice, or is it a warning? A prayer. The frustrating truth is we might never know. What's haunting is how much context is lost. The Etruscans were master diviners, reading omens in lightning and sheep livers. Their rituals were so precise, Roman historians wrote about them in awe. Yet the Liberlintius gives us only crumbs, lists without stories, commands without explanations. Infrared scans reveal faint underlines and marginal ticks, like a priest's personal reminders. Were these notes for an initiation, corrections from a senior scribe? The scroll's survival is a paradox. It only endured because someone thought it was worthless. While Egyptian papyri crumbled, linen proved durable, ironically preserving a text its own culture discarded. Today, as linguists use spectral imaging to recover faded glyphs, the Liberlintius whispers across millennia, not as a grand epic, but as something humbler, a working document, a glimpse of faith in motion. And maybe that's the real secret, not what it says, but what it represents, the quiet, everyday acts that kept a vanished civilization alive. The Grolier Codex should have been an open and shut case of forgery when it first surfaced in the 1960s. Found in a Mexican cave by looters who conveniently couldn't recall its exact location, this crumbling 11-page manuscript lacked the grandeur of other Mayan codices. The paintings were rougher, the colors faded, the depictions of gods almost cartoonish compared to the intricate Dresden or Madrid codices. Even its name was suspect, dubbed Grolier, after the New York club where it was first shown to wealthy collectors, not exactly the provenance scholars trust. For decades, it languished in disgrace, labeled a hoax so obvious that most experts refused to even study it. Then, everything changed. Advanced testing in 2016 revealed something astonishing. The Codex's bark paper pages were undeniably ancient, carbon dated between 12 and 1300 CE. The Maya blue pigment coating its illustrations matched recipes from pre-Columbian times, impossible to replicate with modern chemistry. Even the seemingly sloppy artwork made sense. Analysis showed the brushstrokes were deliberate, following a regional style from the post-classic period. Overnight, the Grolier went from fake to genuine, the only surviving Maya codex ever found in Mexico. But with authenticity came bigger questions, because nothing about its content fits what we know of Mayan religion. Take the deities. While familiar figures like the death god Kisin appear, they're joined by entirely unknown beings, one with a skeletal jaw and serpent tongue, another draped in jaguar pelts but with star clusters for eyes. Their rituals are even stranger. One page shows a figure kneeling before a tree that bleeds black droplets into a bowl, a scene absent from other texts. Another depicts a god holding what might be a severed head, but the victim wears a mask resembling the planet Venus. These aren't just artistic quirks, they suggest a belief system branching off from mainstream Maya theology, possibly a localized cult or even a radical sect. The Codex's astronomical tables deepen the mystery. Unlike the Dresden's precise Venus calculations, the Grolier's charts are erratic, blending celestial events with what appear to be weather omens. Some dates correspond to real solar eclipses, but others point to planetary alignments that didn't occur. unless the scribes were tracking something we've yet to identify. Could these errors actually record atmospheric phenomena like comet impacts or volcanic winters? Or were they symbolic, marking political upheavals rather than cosmic events? What's most provocative is how the Grolier challenges assumptions about Maya scribble traditions. Its pages lack the orderly grids of other codices, with text crammed haphazardly around illustrations as if written in haste. The glyphs themselves are a puzzle. Some match known Mayan syllabary, while others are either corrupted or from a dialect lost to time. A few researchers argue this wasn't a formal temple document but a personal manual, perhaps for a traveling priest or a noble's private library. The codex's murky origins now haunt researchers. Without knowing where it was found, we can't tie it to a specific city or dynasty. Stains on one page hint it was splashed with liquid water from a cave or ceremonial wine. Even its survival defies logic. Spanish bishops burned hundreds of Maya books. How did this fragile text escape? Some speculate it was hidden during the conquest, others that it's from a later revival of indigenous traditions. What's undeniable is the Grolier's power to unsettle. It's a reminder that history isn't a fixed narrative but a palimpsest, with layers still waiting to be read. Every time we think we've mapped the Maya worldview, a lone survivor like this codex whispers, there's more, so much more. The Codex Serafinianus isn't just a book, it's a waking dream bound in paper. Created by Italian artist Luigi Serafini between 1976 and 1978, this modern masterpiece masquerades as an ancient encyclopedia from another dimension. Flip through its 360 pages, and you'll encounter a world where plants sprout into skeletal hands, fish carry elaborate cities on their backs, and couples merge into grotesque hybrids during lovemaking. Every detail is rendered with the precision of a scientific textbook, yet nothing obeys the rules of our reality. And then there's the script, an alphabet of swirling, organic symbols that look tantalizingly decipherable, but resist every attempt at translation. Is this sheer absurdity, or is there method to Serafini's madness? What makes the Codex so hypnotic is its duality. On one level, it's a parody of human categorization, mimicking the structure of medieval herbals or zoological treatises. Chapters divide neatly into flora, fauna, and machinery, complete with numbered diagrams except the flora bleed ink when cut, and the machinery runs on tears. It's as if a Renaissance scholar tried documenting Wonderland, blending Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks with the fever dreams of Hieronymus Bosch. But beneath the surreal surface lies a sly critique of how we impose order on chaos. By crafting a universe with its own internal logic, one we can never fully grasp, Serafini exposes the fragility of our own systems. After all, how much of what we call knowledge is just agreed upon fiction? The artist himself has been coy about the Codex's meaning. In interviews, he's claimed the script was designed to be felt, not read, a visual representation of how children experience books before they learn language. This explains why certain symbols recur near emotionally charged images, like the recurring weeping eye glyph beside scenes of destruction. Some linguists have tried cracking the code, noting patterns that resemble Fibonacci sequences or fluid dynamics equations, but Serafini insists there's no Rosetta Stone. The text isn't a cipher, it's an invitation to project our own narratives. Yet the Codex refuses to be dismissed as mere art. Over the decades, it's spawned obsessive subcultures. Computer scientists have fed its symbols into AI decoders, yielding poetic but nonsensical phrases like, "The river remembers the moon." Conspiracy theorists argue it's a leaked document from a parallel timeline, pointing to eerie parallels between its illustrations and quantum physics diagrams. Even mainstream scholars can't resist anthropologists see it as a mirror to indigenous creation myths, where the world is woven from metaphor rather than matter. Perhaps the most unsettling quality of the Codex Serafinianus is its timelessness. Despite being a 20th century creation, it feels excavated from some arcane archive, as if it's always existed. The paper is artificially aged, the binding deliberately worn. In a way, it's the perfect heir to the ancient scrolls. We've explored another enigma wrapped in the aesthetics of authority, challenging us to confront how easily we confuse the appearance of knowledge with its substance. Serafini didn't just craft a book, he crafted a mirror, and like all the best mirrors, it reflects not what's in front of it, but what lies behind the eyes of whoever dares to look. Deep in the parched wastes of China's Taklamakan Desert, where shifting sands swallow entire cities, lie the silent witnesses to a history we never knew, the Tarim Mummies. These strikingly preserved figures, with their fair hair and European features, shouldn't exist here, thousands of miles from the nearest Caucasian populations. Yet it's not just their appearance that appends the narrative of ancient East-West isolation. Nestled beside them, brittle scrolls whisper into Cheryan, a language as alien to modern tongues as the mummies themselves are to this landscape. These aren't just linguistic curiosities, they're time capsules from a lost world where Buddhist monks traded with red-haired merchants, and the Silk Road was more than a route, it was a cultural collision zone. Deciphering to Cheryan was like cracking a code no one knew existed. Written in a modified Indian script, it bears no relation to Chinese or Tibetan, nor to any living European language. Yet when scholars finally pieced it together in the early 20th century, they made a staggering discovery. Cheryan was a distant cousin of Celtic and Latin, part of the Indo-European family that had somehow leaped across continents. The scrolls themselves are a study in contrast, devotional Buddhist texts painstakingly copied alongside bawdy caravan songs and invoices for silk and horses. One particularly vivid fragment records a dispute over a shipment of heavenly blue dyes, possibly lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, while another contains a monk's lament about the noisy barbarians disrupting his meditation. This wasn't some outpost on the fringe of civilization. It was a bustling hub where cultures clashed and merged. What's tantalizing is what these documents don't say. Unlike official histories which glorify emperors and conquests, the Cheryan scrolls capture the messy humanity of daily life. A shopping list might mention 6 measures of wine beside a prayer for safe travel, hinting at how commerce and spirituality intertwined. Even the Buddhist text reveal surprises. Some passages show traces of Iranian sun worship woven into the teachings, suggesting a fusion of beliefs lost to time. And then there are the gaps. Certain scrolls reference northern kings and fire rituals without explanation, leaving scholars to wonder if they're glimpses of a pre-Buddhist Cheryan religion, one that might have shared roots with the Vedic traditions of India. The real mystery isn't just how these people got here, but how they vanished. By the 8th century, Cheryan disappears from records, its speakers likely absorbed by the rising tides of Uyghur and Chinese expansion. Yet their legacy lingers in unexpected places. Some linguists argue that Cheryan loanwords slipped into Old Chinese, like the term for honey, which resembles the Cheryan word mit. Even more intriguing are the mummies' textiles, tartan-patterned wool resembling Celtic weaves, and crimson dyes matching those found in ancient Persia. These weren't isolated wanderers, they were nodes in a vast, invisible network stretching from the Mediterranean to the Pacific. Modern technology is peeling back layers of the mystery. DNA analysis confirms the mummies carried genes from the Black Sea steppes, while isotopic testing of their teeth reveals childhoods spent far to the west. Yet the scrolls resist easy categorization. Infrared imaging has revealed erased passages, palimpsests where older texts were scraped away, perhaps to recycle precious parchment or to suppress inconvenient truths. One recently uncovered margin note, previously invisible to the naked eye, cryptically mentions the blue-eyed devils beyond the dunes. Was this a slur against rivals or a terrified reference to yet another lost tribe? The Tarim Mummies and their scrolls force us to rewrite the map of antiquity. This wasn't a world of walled-off civilizations, but a kaleidoscope of movement and exchange. Every time we think we've pieced together the puzzle, another fragment surfaces, whispering of connections we're only beginning to imagine. And perhaps that's the most profound lesson hidden in the sand, that history isn't a straight line but a web, and we've only just found the first few threads. The Archimedes Palimpsest is the ultimate intellectual rescue mission, a manuscript that survived against all odds, only to have its greatest treasures stolen not by time, but by human hands. Originally penned in the 10th century, this fragile parchment contained 7 of Archimedes' groundbreaking treatises, copied meticulously by a scribe who likely had no idea the genius he was preserving. Then, 200 years later, a monk in Jerusalem scraped away every trace of those mathematical marvels to reuse the parchment for a prayer book. It's like watching someone melt down a Stradivarius to make a cutting board. But here's where the story twists. The erasure wasn't perfect. Tiny traces of ink clung to the fibers, and beneath the hymns and psalms, ghostly echoes of Archimedes' work remained. Fast forward to the early 20th century, when a Danish scholar identified the palimpsest for what it was. But the real breakthrough came decades later, when cutting-edge imaging technology began teasing out secrets the naked eye could never see. X-ray fluorescence and multispectral analysis revealed diagrams for calculating infinite series, along with a concept so radical it rewrote the history of mathematics, the method of mechanical theorems, a precursor to calculus that predated Newton and Leibniz by nearly 2 millennia. The most haunting discovery: Archimedes was playing with ideas we still struggle to grasp today. His treatise Stomachion isn't just about rearranging geometric shapes, it's an exploration of combinatorics, a branch of math so advanced it underpins modern computer science. Then there's his work on floating bodies, where he grapples with fluid dynamics using principles that wouldn't be formalized until the Renaissance. These weren't just notes, they were blueprints for a scientific revolution that never happened because the world wasn't ready to see them. Yet for all we've recovered, the palimpsest guards its deepest secrets fiercely. Whole sections are still illegible, their ink too faded or the overwriting too dense. Some scholars believe these lost passages might contain Archimedes' rumored work on optics or astronomy, concepts that could have jump-started the scientific method centuries earlier. Others speculate about his legendary heat ray, a device said to harness sunlight to burn enemy ships. Was it myth, or did he leave instructions we'll never read? The tragedy isn't just what was erased, but why. In the Middle Ages, parchment was precious and old texts were routinely recycled. Countless works by Aristarchus, Hypatia, and other giants likely met the same fate, their ideas dissolving into the glue of bookbindings or the ash of furnace fires. The Archimedes Palimpsest is a rare survivor, a parchment that refused to let genius die. As imaging technology improves, who knows what else might emerge from its shadows. Every scrape of the monk's knife left a wound, but also, miraculously, a scar we can still trace. And in those faint lines, the ghost of Archimedes whispers, urging us to keep looking. There's a reason the Gospel of Mary feels like a whisper fighting to be heard. Discovered in 1896, but not fully translated until the 1950s, this fragile papyrus text shatters the familiar image of Mary Magdalene as a penitent sinner or passive follower. Instead, it paints her as a visionary, the disciple Jesus loved most, the one he entrusted with secret teachings the others couldn't grasp. Imagine the scene. After the crucifixion, as the male apostles weep in confusion, Mary steps forward, her voice steady as she recounts private revelations about the soul's ascent past hostile cosmic forces. The men balk. Peter, ever the skeptic, sneers. Did he really speak with a woman in private without our knowledge? Levi fires back in her defense, but the damage is done. That single exchange, preserved in the text's tattered pages, exposes a fault line in early Christianity, one where gender and authority collided with explosive force. What's left of the Gospel is hauntingly fragmented. Only 8 of an estimated 18 pages survive, with gaps so wide they feel like deliberate silences. The most tantalizing losses come precisely where Mary describes Jesus' most radical teachings, passages that might have explained her controversial role. One surviving fragment hints at a cosmology where the material world is an illusion to be transcended, a view that would have scandalized the emerging Orthodox Church. Another warns against the bondage of the flesh, not as a call to asceticism, but as a challenge to break free from rigid hierarchies, whether spiritual or social. It's no wonder this text was sidelined. If Mary's gospel had spread, would Christianity have developed with more room for female leadership, for mystical experience over institutional power? The question lingers like incense in an empty chapel. Scholars now recognize the Gospel of Mary as part of a broader Gnostic tradition that flourished in Christianity's first centuries, one that valued inner enlightenment over dogma. Unlike the canonical Gospels with their focus on Jesus' earthly deeds, Mary's text reads like a guidebook for the soul's journey home. Her vision of the afterlife isn't a static heaven but a dynamic struggle against 7 powers, representing ignorance, envy, and other spiritual traps. This wasn't just theology, it was a map for personal transformation, a radical idea that threatened bishops building a unified church. The real tragedy isn't just the text's suppression, but how its fragmentation mirrors Mary's own fractured legacy. For centuries, her voice was reduced to whispers in apocryphal tales, the redeemed harlot, the weeping mourner. Even the Da Vinci Code's portrayal of her as Jesus' wife, while provocative, misses the deeper truth. The Gospel of Mary shows her as neither wife nor sinner, but as a theologian in her own right. Modern reconstructions using spectral imaging have teased out a few more letters from the damaged papyrus, but key sections may be lost forever. What did Jesus tell her on that mountainside? How did she understand his message differently from Peter or John? The gaps taunt us, reminders of how much history is shaped not just by what's preserved, but by what's erased. Perhaps the most subversive clue lies in the text's very existence. That it survived at all, buried in the Egyptian sands until the 19th century, suggests someone, maybe many someones, thought Mary's words were worth hiding, not destroying. In a world where women's spiritual authority was being systematically written out, this gospel is a stubborn footnote refusing to disappear. It forces us to ask how many other Marys were there, their wisdom reduced to ashes or sealed away in caves. And what might faith look like if their voices had survived? The Bamboo Annals don't just rewrite Chinese history, they set it on fire, buried in a royal tomb around 300 BCE, and rediscovered centuries later. These ancient bamboo slips present a version of events so radically different from the official dynastic records. It's as if someone spliced science fiction into a textbook. Take the legendary Xia dynasty, long considered semi-mythical by scholars. While mainstream histories gloss over its rulers with vague praise, the annals describe startling specifics. Emperor Yu controlling floods with a heavenly engine, or King Jai's court being visited by beings riding chariots of mist. These aren't poetic flourishes, they're precise accounts that read more like technical manuals than myths. What makes the Bamboo Annals so explosive isn't just what they include, but what they omit. The canonical records of the grand historian paint Emperor Yu as a virtuous hero, but the annals hint at something darker, a leader who seized power through technology, not virtue. One passage describes a great light in the sky preceding his rise, while another mentions a metal tablet containing laws no human could have devised. Skeptics dismiss these as later additions, but radiocarbon dating confirms the bamboo's age, and the ink matches formulations from the Warring States period. So if it's not a forgery, are we looking at garbled memories of lost tech, or something even stranger? The controversy reaches fever pitch with the Annals account of the Shang dynasty's fall. Traditional sources blame the tyrant King Yu's cruelty, but the bamboo slips suggest a cosmic intervention, a night without darkness, followed by celestial signs that terrified both sides into surrender. Even more puzzling are the astronomical records. The Annals describe planetary alignments that modern software confirms did occur, but wouldn't have been visible without advanced optics. How did ancient scribes know? Some scholars point to possible Jesuit tampering when the text resurfaced in the 16th century, but linguistic analysis shows no evidence of later edits. Perhaps the most haunting question isn't about the Annals' reliability, but why they were buried in the first place. The Qin dynasty, infamous for burning dissenting texts, somehow missed this one. Was it hidden by someone who feared its truths, or was it, as some theorists suggest, deliberately preserved as a warning? Today, as historians cross-reference the Annals with newly unearthed bronze inscriptions and oracle bones, patterns emerge, fragments of a narrative too consistent to dismiss outright. Whether you see it as alternate history, allegory, or something in between, one thing's clear: this isn't just a challenge to China's past. It's a mirror held up to all history, asking how much we've been told and how much we've been led to forget. The Kolbrin reads like a doomsday letter slipped through time, a sprawling, enigmatic text that claims to hold secrets from both ancient Celtic druids and Egyptian priests. Discovered in the early 20th century, this modern compilation weaves together two distinct strands of wisdom into a single, unsettling narrative. Its pages pulse with warnings of global cataclysms, floods that drown civilizations, fires raining from the sky, and a mysterious destroyer that returns cyclically to wreak havoc. What chills modern readers isn't just the vivid imagery, but how closely these ancient prophecies mirror today's climate crises. Skeptics have long dismissed the Kolbrin as a clever hoax, pointing to its murky provenance. Unlike the Dead Sea Scrolls or Nag Hammadi texts, there's no carbon-dated parchment or archaeological trail to verify its age. The version we have was reportedly transcribed by a secretive British group in the 1950s, claiming to preserve fragments salvaged from a medieval monastery fire. Yet even critics pause at certain details. The text describes rising seas swallowing coastal cities and crops failing due to skies choked with ash, scenarios that feel ripped from contemporary headlines. One passage even warns of the great balance tipping, where nature itself turns against humanity, a phrase that echoes modern ecological tipping points. Dig deeper, and the Kolbrin's dual heritage becomes its most fascinating puzzle. The Egyptian sections, supposedly copied from lost Alexandrian scrolls, speak of a celestial event so traumatic it was scrubbed from official records. The destroyer is a sight of dread, it states. Its breath is poison, its passage marked by the wailing of nations. Meanwhile, the Celtic portions, attributed to Bronze Age Druids, describe years of unending winter and rivers running backward, motifs that align with geological evidence of ancient volcanic winters. Could these be garbled memories of real disasters, supervolcanoes, asteroid impacts, or solar storms? The most provocative theory comes from comparative mythologists. They note striking overlaps between the Kolbrin's destroyer and other cultures' doom bringers, from the Norse Fimbulwinter to Hopi tales of a blue star heralding purification. Even the Bible's Book of Revelation shares eerie parallels, suggesting a shared ancestral trauma. But here's the twist: the Kolbrin doesn't just predict doom. It offers survival advice, building arcs of knowledge and migrating inland, advice that feels uncomfortably prescient in an era of rising sea levels and climate migration. Modern scientists tread carefully. While no one's suggesting the Kolbrin is a literal forecast, its value might lie in its metaphor. Ancient cultures encoded environmental wisdom in myth, recognizing patterns we're only now quantifying with satellite data. When the text warns of the sky's veil tearing, could it be describing ozone depletion? Its plagues of withering sound unnervingly like ecosystem collapse. Even if the Kolbrin is a 20th century creation, it channels a truth humanity keeps rediscovering. Civilizations fall when they ignore the balance of nature. Perhaps the real mystery isn't whether the Kolbrin is ancient, but why its warnings feel so urgent today. In a world grappling with climate grief, it taps into something primal, the fear that our ancestors saw this coming, and we're just the generation holding the pieces. Whether scripture or hoax, its power endures because it speaks to the oldest human question. Not if the world will change, but whether we'll heed the voices whispering across the centuries. Commissioned by the Spanish Viceroy Antonio de Mendoza in 1541, the Codex Mendoza was meant to be a gift for Emperor Charles V, a lavish report on his newly conquered lands. At first glance, it delivers exactly that. Page after page of brightly painted Aztec glyphs detailing imperial tributes, military campaigns, and daily life in Tenochtitlan. But look closer and the brushstrokes betray a quiet rebellion. The Nahua artists hired to create this guidebook for their colonizers waged a silent war of resistance, embedding subversive truths beneath the surface of every illustration. Take the tribute section where conquered cities are shown offering feathers, jade, and gold to Aztec rulers. To Spanish eyes, this was proof of a functioning imperial economy. But the artist slipped in subtle details, a weeping figure hidden in the corner of a glyph, or a tributary bundle painted with symbols of exhaustion. These weren't just records, they were protests, documenting the crushing weight of extraction long before the Spanish arrived. One particularly telling page lists 40 towns required to send 8,000 cloaks annually, a demand so excessive, the accompanying glyphs show villagers hunched under imaginary burdens. The message: this was never sustainable, and you're repeating our mistakes. Even the conquest pages double as cautionary tales, where Spanish chronicles portrayed Aztec emperors as ruthless tyrants. The Codex Mendoza's battle scenes emphasize ritualistic warfare with strict rules capturing enemies for sacrifice, not slaughter. By highlighting these traditions, the artist subtly shamed the Spaniards' indiscriminate violence. In one panel, a victorious Aztec warrior gently restrains a defeated foe, while in the margin, a Spanish soldier's sword runs red with blood. The contrast couldn't be clearer. You call us barbarians, but who truly lacks honor? Then there's the education section, a masterpiece of coded defiance. At face value, it shows Aztec children learning trades and discipline, but tucked between the lines are clues to a stolen future. The school for noble youths, the Comicac, is depicted with empty spaces where glyphs of banned Nahuatl texts once sat. A father handing his son a digging stick instead of a scribe's brush hints at the erasure of indigenous knowledge under colonial rule. These aren't just historical records, they're elegies for a world being dismantled. Modern scholars using infrared scans have uncovered even deeper layers. Faint underdrawings reveal earlier compositions altered to appease Spanish patrons, a conquered city's glyph originally painted with pride, later overlaid with submissive imagery. Some pages show traces of erased annotations, likely the artist's private notes. One tantalizing fragment near a tribute list reads, Tonalpoli, referring to the sacred Aztec calendar, a system the Spanish tried to suppress. Was this a secret timestamp marking the work as part of a larger resistance? The Codex Mendoza's greatest irony. It survived because the Spanish valued it as a trophy, never realizing it preserved the very culture they sought to erase. Today, as linguists decode its glyphs with fresh eyes, the scribes' voices grow louder across the centuries. They weren't just documenting history, they were rewriting it from the inside, ensuring that even in defeat, their truth wouldn't die. Every brushstroke whispers the same lesson: empires fall, but parchment remembers. The Rongo-Rongo Script doesn't just resist translation, it defies logic. Carved into weathered wooden tablets scattered across Easter Island, these glyphs swirl and twist like nothing else on Earth. Some resemble crouching figures, others bent trees or crescent moons, but their meanings remain locked away. What's truly baffling isn't just the script's undeciphered state, but its very existence. How did writing emerge on one of the most isolated islands in the world, thousands of miles from any known literate culture? The mystery cuts to the heart of Rapa Nui's identity. Was this a stroke of independent genius or evidence of forgotten contact with distant civilizations? Consider the timeline. When Europeans arrived in the 1700s, the islanders claimed the tablets had always been there, passed down through generations. Yet linguists note eerie similarities between Rongo-Rongo and other ancient scripts. The bird-like glyphs recall Indus Valley symbols, while the Boustrophedon writing style, alternating directions with each line, mirrors early Greek and Hittite texts. This isn't just coincidence, it's a riddle wrapped in ocean currents. Did Polynesian voyagers capable of crossing vast seas encounter writing systems elsewhere and adapt them? Or did some unknown group reach Rapa Nui first, leaving behind these cryptic tablets before vanishing? The plot thickens with the island's oral traditions. Elders spoke of a legendary scribe named Hotu Mata who brought the first tablets from a sunken land. Myth, of course, but recent archaeology reveals something startling. Carbon dating shows some tablets predate European contact by centuries, debunking theories that Rongo-Rongo was invented after seeing Spanish documents. Even more puzzling, the wood itself comes from the Pacific's Toramiro tree, extinct on the island for generations. Whoever carved these texts had access to resources lost long before outsiders arrived. Attempts to crack the code have bordered on desperation. In the 1950s, a Russian linguist claimed it was a proto-writing system, recording genealogy and chants rather than full sentences. Others see lunar calendars or ritual instructions. One particularly haunting theory suggests the glyphs aren't meant to be read at all, but are mnemonic triggers for oral recitation, a sort of three-dimensional poetry. Without a bilingual key like the Rosetta Stone, though, every hypothesis remains a shot in the dark. What's lost isn't just words, but worldview. The last fluent Rongo-Rongo readers died in the 1800s, taking with them the island's deepest philosophies. Today, modern Rapa Nui artists revive the glyphs as cultural symbols, but the original messages may be gone forever, or perhaps not. In 2018, researchers using AI pattern recognition identified repeated clusters near depictions of fishing and planting, hinting at seasonal records. It's a fragile thread, but one that keeps the hope alive that somewhere in those elegant, enigmatic curves, an entire civilization's voice still waits to be heard. There's a particular kind of fire that starts among scholars when a single scrap of text threatens to burn down centuries of tradition. That's exactly what happened in 1958, when historian Morton Smith made a bombshell announcement. Hidden in a remote Greek monastery, he'd discovered a letter quoting from a lost gospel, one that depicted Jesus in a way no Sunday school would ever teach. Known as the Secret Gospel of Mark, this fragment contained passages so startling, they read like something from a forbidden initiation manual rather than scripture. The most controversial section describes Jesus taking a young man aside at night, teaching him the mysteries of the kingdom of God through an unnamed ritual involving linen cloth and water. The letter itself, attributed to early church Father Clement of Alexandria, treats this gospel as genuine but warns it must be kept secret, a clue that early Christians might have known more about Jesus' teachings than they dared to share. Clement even admits the text had been corrupted by heretics, implying there was something authentic worth distorting. What could have been so explosive? Some scholars suggest the passage hints at a baptismal rite far more mystical than the New Testament's straightforward dunking. The mention of the young man wearing nothing but a linen cloth recalls ancient descriptions of mystery cult initiation, where shedding garments symbolized rebirth. Could early Christianity have incorporated elements of these secretive traditions before purging them? Debate over the fragment's authenticity has raged for decades. Critics argue Smith might have forged it, pointing to oddities in the handwriting or his own controversial personality. But others note the letter's theological nuances, subtle references to second-century debates about spiritual purity that would have been nearly impossible to fake convincingly. Then there's the eerie fact that the physical manuscript vanished after Smith photographed it, leaving only his black and white images for analysis. Was it stolen to suppress its contents, or did it never exist at all? The implications ripple far beyond academic squabbles. If genuine, the secret gospel suggests early Christianity was far more diverse than the tidy narrative of orthodoxy suggests. This wasn't just about alternative rituals, it was about who got to define what Christianity was. The passage's emphasis on secret knowledge aligns with Gnostic texts, where salvation came through enlightenment rather than faith alone. That idea terrified church leaders like Irenaeus, who spent his life hunting down such heresies. By the time the Nicene Creed standardized beliefs in the 4th century, texts like the Secret Gospel of Mark were either destroyed or buried so deep they'd only resurface by accident. Modern technology could settle the debate. Recent ink analysis of Smith's photographs suggests the letter's composition matches other Clementine writings, but without the original parchment, we may never know for sure. Perhaps the real lesson isn't whether the fragment is authentic, but why it feels so threatening. A Jesus who whispers secrets in the night doesn't fit the image of a public savior, and that discomfort forces us to ask how much of history is shaped not by truth, but by what the powerful decide we're allowed to remember. Buried in the arid sands of Peru's Paracas Peninsula, a different kind of ancient text whispers, one woven not on parchment, but in vibrant threads. The Paracas textiles, dating back over 2,000 years, aren't just relics of artistry, they're a cryptographic puzzle stitched into existence. Unlike the familiar quipu knots used by the Inca, these fabrics boast intricate geometric patterns so precise, so deliberate, that scholars are beginning to suspect they're more than decoration. Could these swirling lines and interlocking shapes be a lost language, a tactile code meant to be read by fingertips as much as by eyes? At first glance, the textiles resemble abstract art zigzags, stepped pyramids, and concentric circles dyed in rich crimsons and gold. But look closer, and the patterns reveal an almost mathematical discipline. Certain motifs recur with rhythmic frequency, like the serpent wave design appearing exactly 19 times on one shroud, a number significant in Andean lunar calendars. Others mirror the constellations visible from Paracas during the solstices, suggesting celestial maps woven into cloth. The most tantalizing clue: these symbols aren't random. When researchers overlay textile patterns with known quipu structures, they find startling parallels, color shifts that might represent syllables or knots transformed into stitches. It's as if the weavers were translating one complex system into another, preserving knowledge in a form that could survive conquest and time. The mystery deepens when you consider who created these textiles. The Paracas culture predated the Inca by over a millennium, yet their craftsmanship was so advanced, some threads are thinner than a human hair, woven at densities exceeding 300 threads per inch. Such precision wasn't just technical prowess, it was a form of reverence. These fabrics wrapped the elite in death, their symbols perhaps serving as guides for the afterlife or records of lineage. One particularly ornate funeral mantle, discovered in a subterranean tomb, depicts a procession of figures holding staffs topped with distinct glyph-like shapes. Are these deities ancestors, or, as some researchers speculate, mnemonic devices for oral histories, each stitch a prompt for storytellers? Modern technology is teasing out clues invisible to the naked eye. Hyperspectral imaging has revealed faded dyes beneath the surface, hinting at layers of symbolism erased by time. Meanwhile, mathematicians analyzing the pattern's fractal geometry argue they're too complex to be purely decorative, exhibiting properties found in modern-era correcting codes. Could the Paracas have developed a binary-like system millennia before computers? Yet the textiles resist easy interpretation. Without a Rosetta Stone, a bilingual key linking these symbols to a known language, every theory remains speculative. Some anthropologists propose the designs are proto-writing, conveying concepts rather than literal speech. Others see them as ritual blueprints, encoding instructions for ceremonies or astronomical events. The most provocative theory comes from indigenous weavers today, who suggest the patterns aren't meant to be read at all, but felt, a tactile language communicating through texture and rhythm, a tradition their ancestors still practice in remote highland villages. What's undeniable is the urgency of the puzzle. Many Paracas textiles were looted in the early 20th century, their contexts lost forever. Those that remain are often too fragile to handle, their colors fading as the threads disintegrate. Yet in their silent, stubborn way, they challenge our assumptions about what writing is. If a language can be knotted into quipu or painted on pottery, why not woven into fabric? The Paracas weavers may have left no dictionaries, but their legacy is a question shimmering in every thread. How many other ways of knowing have we overlooked simply because they didn't look like words? The Urancha Book doesn't just claim to be inspired, it insists it was dictated, emerging in the 1930s from an anonymous Chicago-based group. This 2,000-page tome presents itself as a direct transmission from divine beings, a cosmic encyclopedia delivered through sleeping receivers who transcribed messages from higher dimensions. What pours forth is a staggering blend of astrophysics and theology, describing multiverses with mathematical precision while weaving in intimate portraits of Jesus' childhood that never made it into the Bible. It's as if someone took Carl Sagan's Cosmos and spliced it with the Gnostic Gospels, leaving readers to wonder, is this the most audacious revelation of the modern age, or the most elaborate literary hoax since the Voynich Manuscript. What sets the Urancha Book apart is its chilling specificity. While most channeled texts float in vague mysticism, this one dives into granular details, like naming 700,000 inhabited worlds in our universe or describing the chemical composition of an archangel's energy form. One section meticulously charts the evolution of human consciousness across millennia, pinpointing genetic mutations that allegedly sparked spiritual awareness. Another recounts a celestial war fought with Urancha weapons, a term the book defines as energy matter hybrids beyond our comprehension. Skeptics scoff at these claims, but even critics pause at passages predicting DNA's double helix structure years before Watson and Crick's discovery, or alluding to dark matter decades before it entered mainstream science. Coincidence or evidence of something stranger? The debate over its origins splits even esoteric scholars. Some point to linguistic analysis showing traces of early 20th century American English, suggesting human authors, possibly a psychiatrist named William Sadler, who led the group that compiled the text. Others highlight philosophical overlaps with theosophy and Christian Science, movements swirling in that era's spiritual ferment. But believers counter with the book's sheer scale. How could any small circle fabricate such an internally consistent universe, complete with its own celestial hierarchy, superuniverses, local systems, midways, and a revisionist history of Earth that includes lost continents like Lemuria? Perhaps the most haunting parallel lies in its reception. Just as ancient scrolls like the Nag Hammadi texts were buried to protect them from institutional backlash, the Urancha Book's early circulators guarded their copies fiercely, fearing ridicule or suppression. Today, its followers, ranging from astrophysicists to New Age seekers, treat it as a living document, organizing study groups to dissect its layers. Meanwhile, neuroscientists examine its claims about thought adjusters, entities it says guide human evolution, while comparative mythologists note eerie echoes in indigenous star lore. Whether divine missive or human masterpiece, the Urancha Book forces a question as old as the scrolls we've explored. Where does inspiration end and revelation begin? In an age hungry for meaning but wary of dogma, its allure lies in the gamble it asks us to take, to entertain, even for a moment, that the universe might be far stranger, far grander, and far more intentional than we've dared to dream. And maybe that's the real test of any sacred text, not whether it's true, but whether it opens doors we never knew existed. High in the mountains of Ethiopia, where thin air carries the scent of incense and ancient stone, the Garima Gospels rest like a jewel untouched by time. Named after Saint Abba Garima, the 6th century missionary said to have penned these sacred texts in a single, divinely inspired day, the manuscripts glow with colors that have no business surviving 15 centuries, deep crimsons, lapis blues, and gold leaf that still catches the light as if freshly applied. This isn't just preservation, it's defiance. While European manuscripts from the same era crumble into dust, the Garima Gospels remain startlingly vibrant, their pages supple, their pigments refusing to fade. Even the binding, crafted from wooden boards and leather, shows barely a sign of wear. How the answer might lie in a blend of sacred secrecy and forgotten science. Legend claims Saint Garima completed his task as the sun stood still in the sky, a miracle granting him extra hours to finish his work. But modern scholars suspect something equally extraordinary, a masterful understanding of materials. The inks, derived from local minerals and plants, were mixed with substances still not fully identified. Some speculate crushed gemstones or resins from trees long extinct. The parchment itself, made from goat skin, underwent a unique curing process involving volcanic ash and honey, creating a surface both flexible and resistant to insects. Then there's the mystery of the colors. The garish, almost surreal blues and reds don't match any known medieval palette. Recent spectroscopy revealed traces of a rare Ethiopian mineral called stibnite, once used as eyeliner by Egyptian queens, which may have acted as a natural fixative, locking pigments into the page. Yet the real enigma isn't just how the Gospels survived, but where. For centuries, they were hidden in the remote Garima monastery, guarded by monks who believed opening them carelessly could bring calamity. This wasn't mere superstition. The monastery sits atop a geological fault line, and locals whisper that the Gospel's presence alone has spared the area from earthquakes. When British explorers attempted to remove the manuscripts in the 1930s, the monks resisted fiercely, claiming the texts would lose their power if taken from sacred ground. Science might scoff, but consider this. The few pages smuggled out for analysis in the 1960s deteriorated rapidly outside the monastery's walls, while those left behind remained pristine. Coincidence or something more, the Garima Gospels aren't just relics, they're living testaments to a faith that refuses to be erased. Their pages, free of the mold and wormholes that plague other ancient texts, seem to dare time itself. Some scholars argue the monks' strict handling rituals, wearing gloves, limiting exposure to sunlight played a role. Others point to the dry, high-altitude climate. But perhaps the most compelling theory is one that bridges science and spirit, that the scribes of Garima didn't just write about miracles. They made one, blending devotion with an alchemy we've yet to rediscover. In a world obsessed with progress, the Gospels whisper a humbling truth: some secrets aren't meant to be unraveled, only honored. And in their stubborn brilliance, they ask us, what else might endure if we believed as fiercely as those who made them? The Codex Gigas isn't just a book. It's a monument to human ambition and the shadows lurking at the edges of faith. Tipping the scales at nearly 165 pounds, with pages stretching 3 feet tall, this colossal manuscript earns its nickname as the Devil's Bible, not just for its staggering size, but for the chilling full-page portrait of Satan himself, grinning from parchment like a gatekeeper to the infernal. Legend claims it was penned in a single night by a desperate monk, his soul traded for ink-stained salvation. But the truth behind this medieval marvel is far stranger than any folktale. Open its massive covers and you're greeted by a paradox. Alongside the complete Latin Vulgate Bible, there's a trove of secular knowledge, medical treatises, historical chronicles, even exorcism rituals. This juxtaposition baffles historians. Why would a scriptorium dedicate years of labor to a work that mingles sacred scripture with spells for curing gout? Some argue it was a medieval encyclopedia, a one-stop repository for a monastery's intellectual needs. Others detect something more deliberate, a calculated balance between divine and earthly power, as if the scribe sought to tame chaos by binding it between the same covers as scripture. Then there's the infamous devil portrait. Towering over the text, the horned figure crouches in an empty landscape, his clawed hands curling like a promise. Yet look closer, his skin is a sickly green, his kingdom a void. Unlike later demonic art, this isn't a scene of torment but isolation. Some scholars interpret it as a warning. Evil thrives in emptiness, in the spaces between faith and reason. The facing page, oddly enough, depicts the heavenly city, the two images locked in silent dialogue across the spine. Was this a visual sermon or something more personal? Forensic analysis reveals the ink contains iron gall and crushed lapis lazuli, materials so expensive they suggest royal patronage. Did some wealthy patron demand this unsettling contrast as a status symbol, a flex of theological daring? The overnight pact myth crumbles under scrutiny. Radiocarbon dating places its creation around the early 13th century, and the handwriting, though remarkably consistent, shows subtle variations proving multiple scribes toiled for decades. Yet the legend persists, fueled by eerie details. The manuscript's uniformity does suggest a single mastermind orchestrating its production, and the pages bear faint traces of erased undertext, hinting at corrections or censorship. Was there a darker draft we'll never see? Modern technology peels back layers of mystery. Multispectral imaging has uncovered ghostly fingerprints in the margins, likely from the monks who turned these pages centuries ago. One persistent mark stains the devil's portrait, a smudge where generations of readers touched the image, as if testing its power. The Codex Gigas endures not just as a relic, but as a mirror. It reflects our obsession with the line between sanctity and sin, and the uneasy truth that the most profound works often emerge from that very tension. After all, what is faith without the shadow of doubt? The Emerald Tablet reads like a riddle whispered across millennia, just 13 lines of text, yet dense enough to bend the minds of alchemists, scientists, and philosophers for over 1,000 years. Attributed to the mythical Hermes Trismegistus, a fusion of the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian Thoth, its most famous maxim, "As above, so below," echoes through history like a cosmic refrain. But what does it mean to medieval alchemists poring over its cryptic verses by candlelight? It was a literal recipe for transmuting base metals into gold. To Renaissance mystics, it mapped the soul's journey to enlightenment. Even Isaac Newton, the father of modern physics, scribbled feverish annotations in the margins of his copy, convinced it held secrets about the fabric of reality itself. What makes the Emerald Tablet so endlessly fascinating is its deliberate ambiguity. Take the line, "The sun is its father, the moon its mother." On one level, this could describe a chemical process, perhaps the interaction of gold associated with the sun and silver linked to the moon in an alchemical reaction. But peel back another layer, and it might symbolize the union of masculine and feminine energies in spiritual transformation. This duality is the tablet's genius. It refuses to be pinned down, offering just enough clarity to tantalize, but not enough to ever fully reveal its hand. Modern scholars still grapple with its origins. The earliest known version surfaces in an Arabic text from the 8th century, but legends claim it was discovered in a hidden vault beneath the Great Pyramid, clutched in the hands of Hermes' emerald green corpse. Whether myth or fact, its influence is undeniable. The tablet's principles seeped into the foundations of Western esotericism, shaping everything from Rosicrucian rituals to Jungian psychology. Carl Jung saw it as a blueprint for the human psyche, where the microcosm mirrors the macrocosm, inner and outer worlds reflecting each other in an infinite dance. Yet the most provocative interpretations lie in its scientific parallels. Newton's obsession wasn't just mystical. He recognized hints of universal laws in phrases like, "All things were born from this one thing." Centuries later, quantum physicists would ponder the same idea, marveling at how subatomic particles mirror cosmic patterns. Even the tablet structure feels eerily prescient, its terse, axiomatic style reminiscent of modern scientific formulae, where a few symbols can encapsulate the universe. Perhaps the tablet's true power isn't in solving its riddle, but in keeping it alive. Each generation projects its own breakthroughs onto those 13 lines, seeing ancient wisdom refracted through the lens of its own understanding. In a world hungry for easy answers, the Emerald Tablet endures as a challenge to hold mystery and meaning in the same hand, and to recognize that sometimes the deepest truths refuse to be spoken plainly. They can only be sought, From treasure maps to divine revelations, these scrolls prove history is never a closed book. It's a living conversation, scrawled in fading ink and whispered through cracks in time. Think about it, every undeciphered symbol, every scrap of parchment too fragile to touch isn't just a puzzle. It's a heartbeat, a voice insisting I was here. My story matters, the copper scrolls buried gold, the Sibylline prophecies swallowed by fire, the Voinish Manuscript's uncrackable botany, they're not relics. They're invitations. What's thrilling isn't just the secrets we've uncovered, but how they rewrite the rules. The Gospel of Judas forces us to question villainy. The Nag Hammadi texts whisper of a Christianity that might have been. Even the humblest scrap, a merchant's contract from Avraman, a child's homework scrawled on Egyptian ostraka holds galaxies of meaning. Because history isn't just about kings and battles, it's about the scribe who paused to blot ink, the monk who hid forbidden words in a jar, the mother who stitched her prayers into cloth. And the wildest part, we're barely scratching the surface. Right now, in labs from Oxford to Tokyo, scientists are using hyperspectral imaging to read erased texts, AI to reconstruct lost languages, even quantum physics to analyze pigments. Tomorrow, someone might decode the Rohenk script or prove the Oura Linda book isn't a hoax. The next generation of discoveries could be sitting in a basement, a cactus-spined desert, or some forgotten attic, waiting for the right light to reveal them. So here's the real question. Which of these mysteries keeps you up at night? Is it the Book of Soyga's backward spells, or the Garima Gospels' defiance of decay? Maybe it's the Popol Vuh's defiant survival, or the Kolbrin's eerie prophecies. Dive into the comments, argue, theorize, confess which scroll haunts your imagination. Because this isn't the end, it's just the latest page. Hit subscribe and let's keep unraveling the past together. After all, the greatest stories aren't the ones we've finished reading. They're the ones we've only